up,
Good
Power
morning, Power
Nation?
Nation. How's it going? Welcome from the quarantine zone.
Yes. Day one of quarantine. All right, so we're going to quickly review over some economic indicators really quick before we get into fiscal policy. So let's go back. So we have GDP, gross domestic product, which means all the goods that are made in the country in one given year. All right, so you got consumer spending, business investment, government spending, and then exports minus imports. That's our formula for nominal GDP. We're not going to get on real GDP, not yet. And then you have CPI, which measures your inflation. So if inflation means that prices are rising, prices rise too fast, well, not so good. That's why we call it the silent killer. Then we move on to the unemployment rate, where it is your number of your workers that are actively looking for a job. And if they're actively looking, it's divided by your labor force, which is including those that are workers and the ones that are actively looking. Okay, hold up your binoculars because they're actively looking for a job. Okay, so as we move forward, all of these things talk about the health of the economy. Like, is it doing well? Is it not doing so well? Like right now, there's a lot of people that are afraid that we're going to be going into a recession. We got all this stuff going on with monetary tools happening right now. We got some fiscal policy that's happening. They have a spending bill of $8.3 billion that's coming down the pipe. So all of this is to help this coronavirus. So let's talk about fiscal policy for a second. If I want the fiscal policy to grow, expand, so expansionary policy. So one of the tools that I could use is I could increase government spending. And government spending right now, to help the economy, it is growing. So they're pumping some things up. They're increasing their spending in order to get the economy back on its feet. So another thing that they could do is also cut taxes, which also they have done. They have cut taxes on our income. So they can cut taxes. They can increase spending in order for it to grow, which is why we call it the expansionary. We want it to expand. We want to help it. The whole thing is to help the society.
Two big things you can see with fiscal policy right now. First off, they're making it easier to file for unemployment if you're out of a job right now for coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, they are giving tax breaks to people, businesses that are paying sick leave to their workers. So the idea being it incentivizes the business to give them the sick leave, and businesses are getting a little bit of extra money to work with. Mike Pence announced yesterday that he's trying to get it to where everybody, all U.S. citizens, are eligible for a $1,000 stipend during the coronavirus. The idea being there that people have a little bit of extra money in their pockets, they can go and buy the things they need. A lot of people are out of work right now, but it keeps the economy kind of moving along a little bit when otherwise people would just hunker down.
Yeah, so you can still go buy your bread.
If there's any left.
If there's any left. Scarcity. All right, go ahead. Now, we're going to talk about when it slows down and why we need it to slow down. We need to slow down the economy at certain points because inflation is happening. You definitely want stable prices. You don't want, like we had now, gas prices dropped. Well, my economist brain says, okay, well, if they're dropping, I really am looking to when are they going to rise back up again? So I don't want to live in fear. I want my prices to be stable. So if inflation's occurring, and we need it to, while it's great for all the spending and consumer consumption and everything else, it's great, but at some point you need to slow it down. We call this a contractionary policy. So in this policy, you need to decrease this aggregate demand. And aggregate is just a fancy word for total. All this demand by all the consumption that's going on. So you need to decrease this because you have prices that are just rapidly increasing, and the problem is people's income levels are not matching it. So you have what's called an inflationary gap. So in this gap, you need to try to minimize as much as possible, and when you do that, you're trying to decrease the spending. So what government will do is that they will have what they'll call a tight money policy. They will decrease the government spending. This is done with the congressional budget. And then they'll also, or could, and this is they will do with taxes, they will increase taxes. Or you could say, like, they'll hike taxes. There's different words that you can use. But if you increase the taxes and decrease the spending because you're trying to get the money out of people's hands, you're trying to decrease the consumption.
And so think of it on an individual level as well. The government does this with taxes all the time. Things that they're trying to lower demand for, like cigarettes or alcohol or vapes, they raise the taxes on. Or if you're trying to be encouraged by the government to do something like joining the military or us teachers get tax breaks, the government's lowering down our taxes to try to increase our demand. And so if you look at Ms. Grady and I, we signed our contracts for next year. So for the next 12 months, we'll make they hired us for another year. For the next 12 months, we'll make the same amount of money. But if a loaf of bread is twice as expensive next month, that money's not going to take us very far. So they try to do this to slow down inflation or to try to tackle our debt. Right now, we've got like a $1.3 trillion deficit, and so that's just going to keep adding on to our debt until we slow down our spending or until we raise our taxes.
Yeah. Good job. High five. So I'm like,